to the stage this afternoon is very passionate about these things. So I didn't want to pull Tom off, and I don't know whether that was his last slide or not. Panelists, and we also want to give them a chance to share with you. But I think he is framing some of the issues that we're dealing with, particularly recognizing that our smallholder farmers are contributing to the food system and the business of food. I want to invite our 6 panelists up, and the way that we'll run the panel is that we have a set of questions that we will ask them to respond to, and then I want to make sure that actually the chairman of our board is ready, because he will come up shortly thereafter. We're going to do this very quickly, but is the Honorable Ernesto Max Elias Tonella, who is the Minister of Economic and Finance from Mozambique. Is he in the house? I haven't seen him or met him. The next panelist, I'll keep going, Ms. Dina Esposito, who is the Assistant to the Administrator, Resilience and Food Security from the U.S. Agency for International Development. Please come up. Mr. Mehdi Filali, who is the Vice President, Farmer Solutions from OCP Africa. Please also join us on stage. Mr. Sven Tore Hastetler, who's the President and CEO of Yara. Please join us. Mr. Hank Van Jen, who is the CEO and President of the International Fertilizer Development Center. Please also come and join us. And lastly but not least, Mr. Patrick Heffer, who is the Deputy Director General of the International Fertilizer Association. Please also join us. So colleagues, you have heard the framing remarks, and these are all areas that you work in on a daily basis. But I want to start actually with Hank and Patrick, because one of the things that we want to know as we prepare for the summit is how can the Africa fertilizer industry be reinvented to address the unique challenges and opportunities of the continent today. And I think I will start with you, Patrick, because you represent the industry association from a very big picture, and then I'll ask the same question to Hank.
So, thank you, Michael. And here in that part of the room, we don't hear you that well. So, but I know more or less what is your question about. I would like address both the supply side and the fertilizer use side. So, according to what I have heard since yesterday, there is really a consensus that we need to produce more fertilizers in Africa to reduce reliance on imports, to reduce our exposure to future crises. We know there will be others, we don't know when. And also, because African farmers, today they compete with farmers from the rest of the world, but tomorrow they are also likely to compete with other industries, especially the shipping industry, which might use ammonia as a preferred fuel to substitute fossil fuels. So low carbon technologies offer great opportunities, and here can be ammonia production with carbon capture and storage and use, or it can be using as well renewable energy, whether that's solar, wind, hydro, or geothermal energy, and there is plenty of this across Africa. And more recently, if we look even further to the future, there might be opportunities in terms of using what we call geologic hydrogen, which can be drilled and could serve as well as a raw material for producing nitrogen fertilizers. So there is potential. And what is interesting with these technologies, especially green ammonia technology using renewable, is that it can be decentralized, can be considered not only with the current model where, let's say, nitrogen fertilizer production is made largely where you have large availabilities of natural gas. Here it could be done in different parts of Africa where you have these renewable energies, and it could be done also at different scales, from small to large scale. Also something important, and that was mentioned several times in terms of supply, is not only about fertilizers. There is a need to address soil pH, and therefore a need for the fertilizer industry to partner with the liming industry. On the fertilizer use side now, we need to be more farmer-centric. It means developing solutions that are relevant to the farmers, that will help them improve crop productivity, improve profitability, and also be more resilient. What we see already in the fertilizer industry, and that will continue in the future, is that companies are moving from, let's say, supplying mineral fertilizers to providing plant nutrition solutions. That's not only mineral fertilizers, that can be organic fertilizers, can be microbials, can be digital solutions to help farmers apply fertilizer more efficiently. And we can even go further and be provider of farming solutions. And finally, I would say soil health. That's also something that needs to be paid due attention by the industry. Several members of IFA are involved in soil mapping, in soil testing. By the way, one of the nicest soil testing laboratory can be found in one of our member companies in South Africa. So in Africa, there are also companies with very strong soil health management capacities. And lastly, human nutrition and health. So we talked about soil health, but there is a clear link as well with human nutrition and health. And here there is a potential with agronomic biofortification by adding micronutrients, especially zinc, selenium, and iodine to fertilizers to improve the human intake in these nutrients and improve human health. Thank you.
Fertilizer potentially on the continent is particularly interesting, but all of the points that you mentioned are quite relevant. I want to move to you, Hank, because IFDC I know works globally, but you have a particular focus on the continent. In repeating the question, just to make sure that you have it top of mind, how can the Africa fertilizer industry be reinvented to address the unique challenges and opportunities of the continent?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. It's an interesting question. And I will not say anything more that Patrick already mentioned about the innovative power of the industry, because I think that's what is needed. And like Dr. Kalibata mentioned, the summit was foreseen in June, but now is in November. So this meeting at the HRF creates the opportunity to work together towards the summit. Because in the end, there is a direct need of innovation and collaboration between the industry on this side, where we are sitting now, and the farmer community and academia to address fertilizer and soil health as on a holistic way, to assure that mineral fertilizer contributes to improvement of soil and soil health, contributes to agriculture productivity, but looking at it from a holistic perspective. A bit in line with what Patrick said is there is a need from the industry to look at how can you add micronutrients, microbiology, stimulants to your fertilizer, which is used by farmers, to improve your soil health. And I think that's the main request to all of you, also for the summit and for the next 10 years. How can we innovate in a local way to assure that farmers have access to nutrients, which are maybe locally produced when we look at manure or other local sources of nutrients? And how can we add mineral fertilizers available mostly from abroad to assure that there is higher productivity? And like Tom Keogh said, our 50 kgs, which we stated in 2006 in Abuja, luckily we still have 20 years left to assure that we can use 50 kgs in average. We are now roughly at 19 in Africa. So we still have some time to build up to 50 kgs. But also the thinking of 50 kgs in Abuja 2006 in comparison to what we think in the summit 2023 is changed. So there are opportunities for different nutrients, different sources of nutrients which are locally available, including the fertilizers which we bring in from the industry present here. So innovation is the power, but innovation together is the only way forward to address fertilizer and soil health. Thank you, Michael.
No, thank you very much. And I think we're very fortunate to have two of the fertilizer industry representatives with us, key executives, one the CEO and one, again, a leading executive, to talk to us about some of the innovations that they're involved with, because one of the things that is happening is there's greater focus on efficacy from the fertilizer that is sold, and how do we increase yields in some instances with less fertilizer. So I'm pleased to ask first Sven, your thoughts on what role can innovation and technology play in transforming the Africa fertilizer industry and ensuring sustainable agricultural practice.
Well,
and Mehdi, I'll ask you the same question after. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. So it can play a huge role. So I'm here as a private sector player, and I'd like to approach this from a business case point of view and look at the opportunity now related to agriculture and how we grow food, and definitely fertilizer plays a major role in that. But we have seen now how vulnerable the supply chains are. First through COVID, we see it with conflict, geopolitical tension causing price spikes and shortages. Look at climate. It's hard to think of any profession more directly impacted by climate change than farming. And we need to de-risk the food system, and we need to grow food more places. And if you look at the big picture here now, Africa has a unique opportunity. It also stands to double the population from now until 2050. But already today there's a deficit. The food import bill in Africa is between $50 and $75 billion a year, so there's a huge captive market. But there's also the opportunity here to think about exports, and we heard that from Tom's opening remarks as well, that there is an export opportunity if we get the productivity right and use fertilizer in the right way. That's a key part of this. But then we need to think of this as a business as well. And farmers are running small businesses, so let's treat them like business people and focus on nutrient use efficiency, and also establishing that fertilizer is not fertilizer. It needs to be tailored directly to the needs of the farmer, to the crop, and to the soil, so that we add back the right nutrients at the right time, and not too much either, because then you risk doing more harm than good. And here with technology, the knowledge that previously would only be available to large-scale farmers can now be in the hand of the smallholder farmers through mobile phones or smartphones. And but then we need to have a supportive framework around that. And Sustain Africa was mentioned, which is a great direct initiative to support predictability for farmers, making sure they get the right nutrients, and also the direct impact that came from that should serve as an inspiration for how policy is created for the long term, and much broader than Sustain Africa as well. And we see it every day that when we're out in the fields working with the farmers, instead of just focusing on 3 major nutrients, if you add 3-4 more nutrients, as we do in the MyCrop solution, you get a much more complex solution to the farmer, and we see the immediate impact to the yields, which again turn this into businesses. So for us from the fertilizer industry, it isn't about just pushing maximum amount of fertilizer. It's about doing it in the right way, with tailored solutions, working with the farmers, focusing on soil health. Because when you get soil health for free, where you get soil health, you get so many other things for free. It's more resistant to drought, to flooding, to heat, and also to cold spells. And on top of it, you get more nutritious food. And the fertilizer industry certainly has a role to play in that, but it's one that we cannot do alone. We need to do this in partnerships across the value chains, but also with governments to get this right. Thanks.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for that. Mehdi, I'd like to have you share with the colleagues the work that OCP is doing in terms of innovating both with the product, but also in helping some of the SMEs that are part of the value chain for distribution. Please.
Yes. Thank you very much, Michael, for the question. Please enable me to answer to the question about reinventing, how to reinvent.
Can you hear in the back? I just want to make sure. I think you just move your mic a little bit closer to you.
It's better like this? Okay. So I was saying, please enable me to answer to the question about how to reinvent our industry.
Please.
I think if we take at global level, I think we have to shift our paradigm. We have to transit from extreme intensive farming to new sustainable models. And those new sustainable models should have soil health at the center of those models. For sure, at Africa, we are not at this level because we are suffering from low productivity. But I believe that we should do a shortcut and apply directly those new sustainable models based on soil health at the center. To do so, we should apply a scientific approach. First of all, we should understand our soils and their complexity. What are the needs of our soils? What are the cycles? What are the constituents of health of our soils? Then, so for that, at OCP Group, we are investing heavily in digital soil mapping to understand first the needs of our soils, and we have been conducting digital soil mapping in 50 million hectares across the continent with our international and local partners and research institutions and universities. And also we are investing a lot in integrated soil health management approach by working in various programs in more than 10 countries that are developing solutions that are targeting more than 90 million hectares of integrated soil health management in terms of finding solutions to acidic soils, finding solutions to high salinity soils, improving the biodiversity of soils and microbiome. And this is, for us, the first step to get an efficient fertilization. Then when we get all this knowledge about the soil, we can develop the efficient fertilization through various approaches. One of them, it is the 4R, right nutrients, right place, right time, and right rate. And this combined with a customization approach, bringing just the needed nutrients of the soil and the crops, enable us to increase the productivity. And we have some examples with our demo plots. We have been conducting just this year 5,000 demo plots across the continent to disseminate all this good agronomic practice. We have been noticing an increase of yield between 20 to 40% in crops like maize, rice, and potatoes in Rwanda, in Ghana, in Nigeria, and in Ethiopia. To emphasize this, when we combine this 4R and the customization approach with integrated soil health management the increase of yield can be even much higher. And we are noticing an increase of yield that can exceed 100%, for example, in teff, in Ethiopia, and also in maize, in rice, and in pine nuts in Ivory, in Côte d'Ivoire. So for us, this is the best way to reinvent, let's say, our industry, to support the food security in the continent in a sustainable way.
No, thank you. I think from your remarks and some of the conversations we've had so far, because as we plan for the African Fertilizer and Soil Health Summit 2023, we have looked back at 2006, and I think one of the big differences is this greater concentration on soil health and the impact of soil health in terms of creating the yield. So appreciate those remarks. I'd like to have our last question posed to Dina, and you've had a chance to hear from the colleagues. In what ways, because it hadn't been mentioned, it kind of was mentioned in Hank's presentation about the private sector on this side of the lake, if you will, and then the global private sector. But in what ways do you see the private sector being able to collaborate with governments and also international organizations toward driving investment and innovation in terms of improving Africa's fertilizer industry?
Thank you so much for the question, and it's a pleasure to be on this panel with our private sector, international organization, association partners, social enterprises. This is the kind of partnerships that I think we're talking about to deliver on the vision for the African Union's Soil Health and Fertilizer Summit and Action Plan. USAID is a development agency. We invest about $1 billion a year in our Global Hunger Initiative, which is called Feed the Future. And Africa receives more than any other region of the world of those resources. About 45% of that money each year comes here. And while that's significant, it pales in comparison to the problem set. And so we really see our role as first and foremost helping governments create the right enabling environment that incentivizes private sector, and then working with private sector to address market failures and de-risk assessments, investments through a whole variety of different kinds of public-private partnerships. And so I wanted to answer your question both kind of looking back at the onset of the global fertilizer crisis after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and then kind of looking forward to the kind of recovery, regenerate, and act together. Looking back, we know that it was not only an availability problem for fertilizer, but also an access issue and a utilization issue. And we began working with OCP and Yara on our missions across Africa to try to connect their offer, their very generous offer of free or discounted fertilizer, directly to the most impacted smallholder farmers, recognizing the potential for arbitrage and other things, having it get diverted. And so we began working very closely with the private sector. We combined that with a partnership with AFAP on fertilizer financing, which we've talked about is such an important, was an important gap in the system. And then also coupling it with access to other kinds of vitally needed improved inputs, because costs for all inputs for farmers had gone up. So improved seed, improved advisory services, the financing, digital technologies. And we bundled all of that together in a crisis response program we call the Accelerated Innovation Delivery Initiative, with the goal of reaching 6 million farmers through 2 cropping seasons, the one that's passed and the one that's coming, in an effort to sustain crop production and food security on the continent. And that's how we got to know Sustain Africa, which is a partnership, I think, of everybody here on this stage and many others, was really an innovation in its own right to bring together partners to address this crisis, not just relying on humanitarians to deliver a solution, but recognizing the importance of development actors in this space and providing this donated or subsidized fertilizers in a really smart way without distorting markets and getting it out to farmers. So we're really pleased to be able to announce $5 million today to Sustain Africa for this last phase. It's not something that needs to be around all the time, but it's super important that we get the lessons learned right, what worked, what didn't. How do we put on the shelf a rapid mobilization mechanism so we're not mucking around and losing a lot of time the way we did, I think, the first time around. And really recognizing that early warning, early response is not just a humanitarian issue, it's a development agenda, and incorporating risk into our investments becomes so important. So that's kind of on the looking back side. On the looking forward side, AID is really focused on these issues of if fertilizer is available, how do we really facilitate access and utilization? We really came to understand as we reflected on the problem that those farmers who are using fertilizer on the continent were often using 2 to 4 times more than they actually needed. And that really comes to the fore when you don't have a lot of fertilizer, right? How do you use it more efficiently? And that those who did use it were getting a very, very poor return on their investment. The productivity was just really not there. And so we do intend to invest significantly in soil health and fertilizer use efficiency as we have in the past, but this really becomes even more central, as you've said. It's really the crisis. If there's a silver lining to the crisis, it's that it's really built a huge amount of momentum and consensus around this very issue. And now we have the Soil Health and Fertilizer Summit, which gives us all the moment to come together with a collaboration and a coordinated plan. We are, as part of our investment there, we'll be talking more about it there, scaling an approach that we call space to place, because it combines geospatial technology, soil mapping, improved soil mapping, with on-farm knowledge and advisory services, very much as you've described, that OCP is one of many organizations that actually have come around to it. They may not call it space to place, but it's an approach that's coming across the continent, and we're committed to scaling that approach in 4 to 5 agroecological zones in partnership with governments and all of the folks here and beyond, really to get the right fertilizer in the right amounts, in the right place, at the right time, to improve the value proposition of using fertilizer and improving productivity. Ethiopia, as you've mentioned, is already scaling this approach because it has been demonstrated to reduce fertilizer wastage by up to 80% and improve on-farm productivity. It is combined with this integrated soil fertility management approach because we know that just the fertilizer alone is not delivering on what's needed. And so it's an important integration of approaches, and one that private sector fertilizer companies, development organizations, social enterprises, and more are really looking at. So we invite others to join us to make investments that contribute to the Soil Health and Fertilizer Action Plan, to come to that meeting, but even more importantly, to stay on to figure out how we're going to get a broad coalition of really diverse partners together to deliver on the plan, because it's a very integrated, it's not just about soil health or fertilizer use efficiency. It's about finance, it's about trade, it's about policy and regulatory reform. And so it will take a broad coalition of partners, and we're very much looking forward to working with all of you on that.
Thank you very much. I am mindful of time because I know that there are probably questions, and I would have liked to have a second round, but I want to ask you all to give a round of applause for our first panel. I'm going to ask the panel please to return to their seats, and I'm going to actually hand over to the second moderator of the session this afternoon. And just again to frame this for you, the theme of the second session is soil health in food systems, feeding a growing continent. And to handle these duties, I'd like to invite Dr. Natrenga Sanginga. Many of you may know him as the former Director General for West and Central Africa of SEGIR and the former DG of IATA. I learned this morning that he is soon to be the Special Envoy for the Feed Africa Summit, so I'll give him a present title. And of course, as I mentioned, he is our board chairman of AFAP, so we're particularly proud to have him come up. Thank you. Round of applause.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sanginga, and as Michael said, the former DG of the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture. I retired 6 months ago. And just like the former Prime Minister of Tanzania indicated, him being the chairman of the Presidential Advisory Council of Tanzania, 2 weeks ago I was nominated to be as well the chairman of the Presidential Council for the DRC, DR Congo. But here I'm going to, thank you. And I'm a soil scientist and worked for a long time at IITA. In the 80s and 90s, there was a kind of ideological divide in terms of soil science. There's a group of people who thought that Africa has to use low input agriculture. And I remember as a scientist, even a soil scientist at IITA, during those periods in the 80s, we were almost prevented to use fertilizer in our research. And we spent almost 20 years working on agroforestry, organic inputs. And a group of us, I think Dr. Van Looy is here, we thought that was wrong, that was putting Africa at a wrong step. And I approached Dr. Adesina, who was a scientist working at Rockefeller Foundation. During that period, in 2006, we went and met President Obasanjo. And he asked us a very simple question: why are we not using fertilizer in Nigeria? And the answer was, even at IIT, we are not doing research on that because they're using low inputs. And we organized a summit in Abuja, and the recommendation became quite clear that we had to use not only 50 kilograms of fertilizer, but it has to be combined to some organic inputs. And there, I think the idea of integrated soil fertility management took place. And 17 years later, we are going to organize a summit, which is called Fertilizer and Soil Health Summit. I was with President Obasanjo yesterday, and I tried to explain to him what we are trying to do, and asked me a very simple question: Dr. Sanginga, can you define soil health for me? And I'm going to ask my panel, basically, to explain, if they have to explain to my grandmother what soil health means and what's going to be the impact of soil health on her small plot. It will be a very interesting question, and I'm sure some of the president would like to basically have an answer to a very, very, very simple question. And here I'm just trying to prevent that we again get taken by ideology. For talking about agroecology for this moment, you don't know exactly what they mean. So it will be very good for the summit that is really coming that we speak. We have a common definition of what fertilizer and soil health mean and how we can measure that. So I would like probably for this panel to invite the speaker, the Minister of Rwanda, is going to give us a keynote address. Please welcome, Honorable. Thank you.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, all protocol observed, a very good afternoon. I'm pleased to be here to represent my country, Rwanda, to this important continental conference on food systems, and particularly on this session regarding the critical role of soil health in the food system. I first of all would like to thank the host country for the great hospitality and the warm welcome we received so far. We all recognize that soil health is an essential part of the agriculture sector and hence the core to our food systems. It represents the foundation upon which our crops grow. Our livelihoods depends on that, and our continent's food security is built on the soil health. It is more urgent than ever to reverse soil degradation and tackle its effect on food systems. Soil health and food security are intrinsically linked because soil health, healthy soils, if I can say that way, are the lifeblood of crop production. They provide the essential nutrient, structure, and water retention capacity that enable us to grow the food we need. I think I'm trying to explain to your grandmother. That's what the nature of soil health. However, in our African food systems, we are still vulnerable. Our food systems are still vulnerable, and the soil degradation threatens our ability to meet the rising demand for food. So as we look for the future, we must take stock of the immense challenges and opportunities that lie ahead in our quest to feed a rapidly growing continent. If I may give the examples of my own country, Rwanda, soil erosion is still one of the most serious environmental problems because many catchment areas in Rwanda are being affected. About 45% of the nation's arable land is exposed to high erosion risk. This vulnerability to erosion has detrimental impact on agricultural productivity, of course. The challenges are real and they demand our urgent attention. Soil erosion, nutrient depletion, contamination, and the impact of climate change are taking a toll on our soils. These challenges are not insurmountable, which is a good news, but they require concerted efforts and innovative solutions. Among these solutions are the strengthening of the erosion control techniques. I think the panel will go into details, but the promotion also of smart climate agriculture, conservation agriculture, techniques that preserve soil health and fertility. We need to secure land tenure, launching effective education programs, strengthening extension services, establish national soil information systems, and fostering international technical and scientific collaboration. In Rwanda, we are trying to do some initiatives. For example, when we trying last year, 2022, we tried to roll out conservation agriculture techniques, where we do minimum tilling of the soil, where we have initiated the demo plots of conservation agriculture among all 500 sectors of our country. We are building fertilizer blending plant in Rwanda, where we'll be able to fertilize the soil depending on the nature of the soil. We are introducing soil testing, and the future use of organic fertilizer will be based on the nature of the soil so that we don't harm. We will be bidding on the soil what the soil really needs. And we believe that this October we'll be able to start this business because our fertilizer blending plant is being completed in a partnership with the Rwanda fertilizer company. We do together with the government of Morocco, OCP. And we believe this will be a game changer for our soils as long as agriculture is concerned. We also try to mobilize our farmers to use more organic fertilizers and develop or be able to manufacture their own compost from livestock to make sure we do complementarity, because not only organic fertilizer the mineral organizers will not make it until we combine with the organic fertilizers, and that our farmers have the capacity and the capability to make. We are trying to promote water efficiency, water use efficiency, and very recently we have graduated the first cohort of university students who were doing conservation agriculture in our Institute of Conservation Agriculture. That is 3 years old in Rwanda. They do conservation agriculture, they do cropping, they do value addition, they do poultry, they do dairy processing, and all in a conservative way. So we are sure that together as a continent, we must tap into the opportunities that the continent is offering to make sure we conserve our soils. We must also formulate, revise, and implement policies and actions towards healthy soils for sustainable agriculture. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, let us remember the critical importance of soil health in our pursuit of food security. This is both a matter of national and continental security. We should commit to this cause unreservedly. Our actions today will shape the food security landscape for future generations. I urge, therefore, all of us to work together, share knowledge, and implement sustainable practices that will ensure the future of the continent. Let there be food on the African continent. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Excellency. Yeah, so I would like to call the panel, and I'll start with Dr. Bernard van Looy, the Deputy Director General of Research for ITA. Can you please come on board? The second panelist will be Dr. Tilahun Ahmad, the Head of Resilience and Climate and Soil Fertility at AGRA. Dr. Joe Cornelius, CEO of Bill and Melinda Agriculture Innovations. Yeah, please, come on board. Dr. Leg Ann Winawoke, she's the lead for Coalition for Action on Soil Health at ECRAF C4. Come on board, please. Mr. Nico Jansen, the Program Manager of Agriculture Livelihoods at IKEA Foundation. Come on board, please. Dr. Teresa Numbi, the CEO of Dodoma Cement. Come on board, please. So I'm going to proceed differently. I'm not going to ask questions. I would like you to speak from your heart. You are a specialist. You heard the minister. You know the topic. And please give us advice. And remember, if you were in the presence of the president of Tanzania, and you have to explain how she is going to invest in soil health, what will be your speech? And if you have to speak to my grandmother as well, how would you convince her that her small plot will get benefits from your soil health? So let me start with Bernard Van Looy, and we go in a series. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Thank you.
You have 3 minutes.
3 minutes. Thank you, Dr. Sangingo. If you ask me what is soil health, I will refer to 4 properties: soil organic carbon, available P and potassium, good soil pH, and water stable aggregation. Now, of course, if your grandmother did not study agronomy, she will probably not understand what I'm saying now. So I would tell your grandmother a healthy soil produces healthy crops. And that's what I would say. Now, if you would allow me to spend 1 more minute, I was really happy to hear Tom talk about agronomic gain. Yeah? 15 years ago, we talked about fertilizer use, about nutrients, about crop yield. Now we are 15 years later, now we talk about soil health. It took us 15 years to go beyond nutrients. But there's 2 other really key aspects that I think we need to absolutely take on board when we talk about the next level of investments and not wait another 15 years to add them. It was mentioned already, but I want to stress them. One is the resource use efficiency. I think Dina mentioned it and a lot of others. It's not about whether we have 50 kilograms of nitrogen used or not, or whether we move to 100. If you use the current 50, double as efficient as it is today, with 50 you'll get double yields. So we can still do much more even with the 50 we have. That's the third thing. The resource use efficiency also refers to water and labor. We talked about mechanization, about Excellency talked about water use in Rwanda. I think that's the third dimension. And the fourth dimension is climate adaptation. We referred to it also a few times. But agronomy and all the work we are talking about provides excellent entry points into dealing with climate adaptation. The CEO of Yara referred to it also. So within our Excellence in Agronomy initiative of the CGR, we are conceptualizing agronomic gain around those 4 dimensions. And my recommendation would be to take those 4 recommendations equally seriously when we move into the next level of investments as the result of the soil health. So that's what I wanted to contribute, Mr. Moderator. Thank you.
Yeah, I will start by advising her to invest on land and water management issues that are very expensive or beyond the reach of a farmer. For example, degraded soils which are not responding to inputs are very expensive. So, for example, managing acid soils. Or as the minister said, managing landscapes, minimizing erosion, bringing critical inputs from distance, particularly, for landlocked countries. So there are some critical inputs, interventions that are beyond the reach of the farmer that a government has to support. But also issues related to policy. For example, land tenure policy, ensuring that farmers have the confidence to invest on their farms and their landscapes, but also making sure that the extension system is strengthened, the capacity is created, so that farmers have access to information, but also to critical inputs, including last mile delivery systems. So these are really issues that are beyond the farmer and are requiring an external intervention and the policy support.
I've been a farmer my entire life, and it's amazing to me that over 10,000 years, we have not had the ability, capability, resources, or tools to actually enhance and improve the single most important natural resource on this planet. We are fed by the soil. We are clothed by the soil. We are housed by the soil. The water we drink, the creatures that we cohabitate with are all nurtured by the soil. And now is one of the most exciting periods in history for science and for farming, because we are actually seeing a convergence of agriculture and biology with math, engineering, robotics, in ways that were never before even imagined. We're now seeing tools that actually allow us to be able to phenotype for roots below ground. Think about this. Every tree you look at, half of it is out of sight. The biomass of this planet is what we walk on as well as what we eat and what we sit under. And these tools not only allow us now to actually be able to start selecting for genotypes and ultimately seeds and traits that are more drought tolerant, but agriculture is now at the forefront of all these planetary challenges that we're facing. Agriculture has scale. Agriculture is renewable. Agriculture is local. And agriculture can make significant progress towards our improving soils. Every 1% increase in organic matter results in a 12% increase in productivity. And half the fertilizer we apply to soils is lost either to the atmosphere or to water. We can improve the ability of crops through genetics to actually be better stewards of the nutrients that they have access to. We can make crops that actually are deeper rooted, can access nutrients at a deeper profile. We can create roots that actually are able to sequester carbon deeper and build carbon reserves in the soil, and ultimately advance not only the needs of smallholder farmers, but also the needs of society in general. Thank you.
One thing you taught me is to always speak from the heart, so I will continue to do so. So I'm Lee Winowicki. I'm a soil scientist at World Agroforestry based in Nairobi. But my career in soil health started here in Tanzania, working with Seliani in Arusha. So I'm so pleased to be back here and to share some of the insights I've learned. And building on what our speaker just said, soil is so often overlooked. And we all have a real duty and responsibility to make sure that is no longer the case. In fact, I'll take my 3 minutes for us to reflect on Tom's photo. That photo of the barren land, the degraded soil, eroded soil. It's estimated that over 30% of the Earth's surface is degraded, meaning that soil can no longer provide vital ecosystem services, carbon sequestration, water purification, and of course what most people at this conference have been focusing on, nutritious food. So now is the time. Soil health is on the agenda to start building healthy soil ecosystems. So I want to just reflect on 3 principles. 1, we must do everything we can to stop further erosion, to stop further degradation. Let's make sure the next IPBES report comes out saying we have decreased erosion globally. 2, we must give back. We keep taking from the soil without giving back. Dr. Lal says soil is like our bank account. You can't keep withdrawing from it. You need to give back. And the 3rd principle is building on what you said. We need to start thinking of soil as a unifier, as this entry point for climate action, climate change mitigation, and adaptation. Building healthy soil ecosystems contributes to ecosystem restoration. Many African governments have committed to AFAR 100 to restore ecosystems. Finally, biodiversity. Soil is the most biodiverse ecosystem in the world, and we can really use soil to contribute to all of these goals, including food and nutrition security. So that means we must work together urgently. And remember, building healthy soil means we're building a healthy planet.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Zanginga, for the challenging question of how to explain to our grandmothers, or maybe our children, what soil health means. I was last year on a trip in Kenya where we were talking with farmers about soil health. And a rice farmer said to me, after working in a program that we support on soil health, he says, my soil has gotten lighter